I dug out my wedding vows the other night. I hadn't read them since we got married, and our 5th anniversary is coming up. I wanted to see if I was holding up my end of the deal. Brandon and I each wrote our own vows, agreeing on just a rough word count and leaving the rest a surprise, and we read them to each other for the first time during the ceremony in front of our assembled families and friends. Wedding vows were made to be said aloud, and when you look at somebody's vows written out, anybody's, even your own, they tend to read like a Hallmark card. In my vows, I told Brandon that he's the best person I know, and that when I describe him to someone new, the first thing I say is, "He's so good." I told him that I love the fact that he whistles constantly without knowing that he's doing it. I love that he's been singing the same Caetano Veloso song in the shower since we met, and that he still can't get the lyrics right. I love that he's the first person our friends call when they're in trouble. I love that he likes to make people happy. My mother once told me that the reason she fell in love with my father was that she knew she could always learn from him. When I met Brandon, I knew what she meant. Explaining why I love Brandon was easy, but then came the tricky part of the vows, the part where I had to make the kind of promises that make you married. I remember the day I wrote that part because it made me very nervous. Not that that's a real problem. I've always thought marriage was a fine thing to be nervous about. There's nothing breezy about "until death do us part." You're hitching your wagon to someone else's, and if you're totally honest about it, neither of you really knows how the steering column works, which road you'd be smartest to take, and whether somewhere down that road, your spouse's wheel hubs will open to reveal blades designed specifically to tear your wagon apart, Ben-Hur style. I see trepidation as a mark of sanity. But that's why I forged ahead and wrote what I did, because I knew all of that and still wanted to get married. So I told him that I would always love him and support him, even though the word always makes me feel like I need an antacid. I wanted to say it. I wanted to believe it. I vowed to work with him to make our hopes and dreams real, whatever they might be. And I meant it. I had already had a preview of Brandon's hopes and dreams. When we met in the spring of 2005, he was 23 and living in New York, and I was 26 and living in Seattle. He was a trained saxophonist and composer working on a master's degree in composition. I worked in publishing, wrote a food blog, and was slowly extracting myself from a doctoral program that I'd decided not to finish. We both loved to cook and eat. Brandon was particularly into espresso. He had 3 espresso machines and a commercial-grade grinder that was larger than some New York kitchens, each one carefully researched and purchased on eBay. The first time I took him to visit my mother, he spent an entire afternoon working on my dad's old Faima Contessa, which hadn't been touched in the 3 years since he died. A bolt in the housing was stuck, and Brandon wrestled with it for most of an afternoon. When it came loose, he made my mother a cappuccino, and then he grinned for a week. But about a year after we met, when we moved in together in Seattle, he started noticing that caffeine made him feel like the Hulk, like yelling and smashing things and wearing tight purple pants. So he gave up espresso and sold his fancy machines. Instead, he decided he would build violins. He'd always loved the instrument, the romance of it, the sound of it, the fact that it's notoriously difficult to build well. Brandon loves a good problem. He was starting a PhD program in composition at the University of Washington that fall, and he had a job at a restaurant. But building violins, he thought, would be a nice way to spend his free time. After we settled into our first apartment, he built a workbench from plywood and 2x4s in the basement. He bought chisels and planes of every size. Whenever we were out in the car, he pulled over at every garage sale shopping for tools. He bought books on violins. He bought a broken violin and broke it even more, studying the way the parts fit together.